Good morning and welcome back ITS Heartland members for session day week number 2 of the 2020 ITS Heartland webinar series. My name is Kurt Rotering, the current past president of ITS Heartland. We had a little technical difficulties this morning, so you don't get to see my pretty face, just my voice, but that's all right. If you missed last week's session, you can see my face there, but the recording has been posted to the ITS Heartland website. Just go to the annual meeting link on the website, which is itsheartland.org, and a link to the recording is on the left side, down a little bit on the screen, next to last week's date. And this week is being recorded as well and will be placed in that same location. Today, we have another great lineup of presentations, vendors, the Nebraska State Update. We'll present the Best of ITS awards at the end. Before I get started, I first want to thank our sponsors, which I think you see on the screen. Their generous support has allowed us to provide these sessions to all of you for free. So thank you to H&TB, Transsystems, Walter P. Moore, ADCO, StreetSmart, Snyder and Associates, Econolite, HDR, Olson, SRF, JEO, Transcore, General Traffic Controls, and Image Sensing Systems. Links to their websites are on the ITS Heartland website as well, so please, when you get a free second, go visit and see what products and services they have to offer. With that, as we get through these presentations, please post any questions to the Q&A tab on the right. It should be open on the right of your screen. If we don't get them answered during today's webinar, we'll provide answers afterwards to you and everyone else. So, to start week 2 of the 2020 ITS Heartland webinar series, we have a vendor update from Econolite and their new Centrax system platform. So, Econolite.
Econolite, saving lives through improved mobility.
Introducing Centrax Mobility, the most powerful and flexible cloud-based traffic control software platform. Centrax Mobility is designed to provide transportation agencies of all sizes with the most sustainable, intelligent traffic control solution available to improve safety and mobility on your roadways. What is Centrax Mobility? Centrax Mobility is specifically designed to meet an agency's modern-day needs. The mobility platform converges data sets and capabilities across agencies from multiple sources, such as high-resolution controller data, connected vehicle data, and sensor data. Centrax Mobility provides rich data analytic capabilities, including signal performance measures, automated timing pattern optimization, and highly capable adaptive signal control in real time, in turn delivering new levels of traffic signal control and intelligent automation. Centrax Mobility converges these rich data analytics with signal system management, including real-time status, events, alerts, the controller remote front panel, and the timing plan database editor. Centrax Mobility features an intuitive, easy-to-navigate user interface, allowing you to see firsthand the metrics that matter, reduce delay, fuel consumption, and carbon emissions, and giving you a clear return on investment. Centrax Mobility also brings you a wide array of system features such as travel time, incidents, controller management and control, and more, giving you all the traffic management tools you need in one powerful toolbox. Centrax Mobility is backed by the top-tier Econolite support team, allowing you to get the most from your system investment. Centrax Mobility, the next generation in traffic management from Econolite, saving lives through improved mobility.
Great, thank you. Next, we have a presentation from Peter Rafferty of Gannett Fleming on automated transportation readiness. Peter is in Gannett Fleming's Advanced Mobility and Planning Group and is based out of Madison, Wisconsin. Peter has his bachelor's in civil engineering from the University of Washington and his master's in transportation engineering, planning, and economics from the University of Minnesota. Peter has been involved in the transportation industry for over 20 years, mostly working on TSMO, so I'm excited about this presentation. right, Peter.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Peter here. When the ITS Heartland meeting was going to be in person in Des Moines last April, this was going to be a 5-state panel on cooperative and automated transportation, or CAT, and that's where the herding cats comes in. You'll also hear me speak about connected and automated vehicles, so CAV, CAT. I'm really using that interchangeably. Nonetheless, given how 2020 is going, glad to be here with you today for the webinar. I am going to take the next 15 minutes or so and try to give you an introduction to what automation readiness means for a transportation agency and infrastructure owner operators, or IOOs. And I'm going to do that by talking about some national examples, touch on briefly a few international frameworks, and then some other state experience. So it's a lot to get through. We're going to sail through a lot of this. If you see text on the slides that I'm skipping over, you can always come back and take a look at it later. Brief note on timelines, first of all, because I always get the question about, well, when is this stuff coming? Why do we have to worry about this now? And I assure you that it's here, it's going on. And if you're a planner, definitely don't think this is so far in the future that you don't have to think about it. And when this stuff happens, has a lot to do with what agencies are doing. So I'm talking to state DOTs and MPOs and local transportation agencies, traffic departments, that sort of thing, to work with industry to bring these technologies forward in time so that we can get to those benefits sooner. You see in the corner there the Jetsons, and I do like to put that bit of trivia out there because that takes place in 2062. So in that case, we do actually have 42 years or so to get ready for that. I'll touch on the AASHTO national strategy, the FHWA concept of operations. I mentioned the international things, and then I'm going to talk about, I think, 2 examples from other states. So first on these national efforts, there's a gear graphic there shown, and you can see some of the interaction, how it's shown between the AASHTO national strategy and the FHWA automated driving systems, or automation ConOps, the concept of operations. And I'll talk about each of those in turn. And then there's also the ongoing research. I mentioned there on the side, there's 1,000 other groups out there. If you think you know them all, you probably are halfway there. The CAT Coalition, PAVE, TRB, AASHTO, state groups, their international groups, SAE, just on and on and on. So no shortage of opportunity to be engaged. On the AASHTO national strategy, there is a report that was published in early 2020 that laid out the business case initially, and you can see some of the things there. I'm not going to talk about all the common motivations we have for mobility, accessibility, safety, certainly. That's for a different presentation. It lays out this business case in terms of those things I just mentioned, including some national security corollary things, public health and safety, accessibility, all these things are part of it. Here is an image of their framework, and this is the key thing I want to draw your attention to for the AASHTO work, is that they are looking at readiness in terms of policies, roadway systems, mobility, research and innovation, and then the public trust and understanding. And that's a really important one not to lose sight of. And then this graphic shows within roadway systems how that can be broken out into different types of infrastructure, physical and digital, also the collaboration and the other things noted on there. The implementation is shown here. There was an infra grant that involved many states, including both Nebraska and Iowa here in the Heartland. And it wasn't funded, but that really laid a nice groundwork for some continuing work within AASHTO, and actually within the committee work within AASHTO. For the Federal Highway Administration concept of operations, it asks why AT readiness first, and it builds on the national dialogue, the FHWA national dialogue that took place some years ago. That had a series of workshops around the country. Hopefully a few of you had a chance to be a part of those. A lot of dialogue, a lot of good input gathered during that series of events. And it painted the picture and it pointed to the need for something like a concept of operations that more explicitly engaged private industry stakeholders, and then developed, in this case, 8 integration cases, which I'll show in a moment. The industry gear is a slightly different gear graphic that you see here. And the industry gear is added very, very intentionally to show that the industry input as part of the stakeholder groups was critically important to get this right and to keep working on bringing together that collaboration between IOOs and industry to, again, move these benefits sooner. The ADS, automated driving system, referring, if you're a SAE level person, that's level 4, is really what this is primarily targeting, asking the different questions you see on there. I'm not going to get into any more detail on that. And then here is the crux of the framework, the safe system approach. So at the top, there's community, businesses, travelers, the environment in which, the social and political environment in which these things operate, vehicle systems, and infrastructure systems on either end there, and then institutional systems. Now, what's not shown here, which is very important to keep in mind, are the 6 interactions between these 4 items. So between vehicle systems and institutional systems, you have the regulatory and enforcement interaction. Between infrastructure and communities and businesses, you have a service interaction. There's also market, there's a planning, and then a really important one for us as transportation professionals is the interaction between vehicle systems and infrastructure, which we're calling cyber-physical interaction. And so keep that framework in mind for them for later when we come back and recap. The 8 integration cases I mentioned are listed here, and what's going to be coming out of the ConOps in 2021. For each of these integration cases, an IOO or an agency will be able to pick up that section and look at all the different ideas that they have documented in there for any of these to accelerate readiness and do the things that have to be done to work as they work with industry to make these things a reality sooner. A couple of examples of multi-state readiness efforts. The Eastern Transportation Coalition, formerly the I-95 Corridor Coalition, is just now starting on this effort, and they have these 6 draft sub-areas that you see on the right side of the slide there. I'll let you read those, and you'll see those again right at the end. And then for MASTO, which includes 3 of the 5 Heartland states, I think later this week they have their own CAV E-Summit going on. They've identified the 4 goals of safety, sustainability, mobility, equity. There's no readiness framework developed yet, but it is something that has some interest among the different members of MASTO there, in addition to the things going on with AASHTO. Briefly, 3 international examples. The first one is from KPMG, a large management consulting firm, and they looked at the 4 areas of readiness and developed a readiness index based on policy and legislation, the technology and innovation, infrastructure, and then consumer acceptance. And there's that consumer acceptance, that community willingness to have these as part of their mobility ecosystem. The second one, a little harder to read, is the from United Kingdom and a company Zenzik, where they really focus on the infrastructure side, including the communications and digital infrastructure, and then the physical infrastructure and what I'll call operations, so intelligent network management, and then there's testing and development there. Those are those items in orange that you see on the slide there. And then there's some other services shown. If you go to the Zenzik website, you'll find this. They really do a nice job with their graphical depictions of this. The third and last international one I'll draw your attention to comes out of Australia, Austroads. And this is also very infrastructure readiness focused, but it's a series of documents really laid out so nicely with an emphasis on the traffic control part of infrastructure readiness, but also the HD mapping, which I haven't mentioned yet. That's part of that, the cyber physical part of readiness, and who is responsible for that. Right now, it really rests within any of the OEMs or ADS firms that are out there doing this kind of work. There's no general clearinghouse that's really emerged yet. A lot of people are working in this area. And then cellular coverage. One thing you won't ever hear me recommend, with the exception maybe with traffic signals, is roadside infrastructure. So the V2X kind of infrastructure for the roadside, with the exception of in urban situations with traffic signal control largely. Otherwise, cellular is really the way that the industry is moving to and what's going to have the viability. So Australia just says, get the cellular coverage. Then the rest of my time, I'm just going to skip, or not skip, I will skip Pennsylvania, but I will talk about Iowa and then Maryland. So first of all, on Iowa, in March 2020, they issued an automated transportation vision document, which I think is just excellent. And the approach they took was to follow these three prongs. So taking a look at the strategy first, the vision, the mission, the high level goals. And this is true for any strategic planning. The work you do needs to align with that. The programmatic prong is a bridge between the strategy and the tactical approach. And the programmatic gets at the resources and who's responsible for what. And there are a number of items within that. And then that further is defined through the tactical items. And then coming out of this AT Vision document was a series of work plans for each of their 6 objective areas. And you can see on there those 6 listed, and one of them is focused on infrastructure readiness. And as part of Iowa's readiness framework, they look at infrastructure, organizational, state, and even national policy and support for for transportation automation. That's also on their website. The second state example that I'll show is from Maryland. All of these examples I'm showing there are others out there, surely, but I'm focusing on the ones that I had some direct involvement in. So the framework approach for Maryland was to define the readiness frameworks, the readiness areas, and then some subcategories, and then some phased approach, so the timeline and the measure itself. So within each readiness area, there are these 3: physical, digital, and operations. And actually there is a 4th, policy, but that wasn't included as part of this framework, which was focusing on operating the infrastructure, managing and maintaining and operating the infrastructure. Within each of those 3 categories or areas are 3 subcategories. So within physical, you see traffic control, structures, and roadway. Digital has the things mentioned, and operations mentioned there. And there's this circular concept. And here's an example in greater detail of one of the areas, digital readiness, and it shows the 3 subcategories there and the concentric circle of ratings for connectivity, data management, and cybersecurity. Privacy. We looked at a lot of different things within any of these subcategories and thought about them in terms of IOO deployment, things they're more directly responsible for, and IOO facilitation. And you can see the list of things on there. Now, I'm not concerned with any particular detail of this, and I would never suggest that anybody just takes this and adopts it as is, because it has to align with your own organization's program structure and what it is that you have authority over, ability to influence. But the important thing is that there's some indication to an agency for help with prioritizing how best to close the gaps for automation readiness across any of these areas. So in summary, I put together this chart because we covered a lot of different examples. down the left side in the rows, you see labeled the different categories or areas of readiness that these different organizations looked at. And again, these are ones, except for the international, that I had some direct involvement in. And I did add Pennsylvania, even though I didn't talk about it on this webinar. A couple of things to take away here. First is that infrastructure readiness is something that everybody needs to look at, and that's what you see on the chart here. Whether it's split between physical infrastructure or digital infrastructure and data or communications, that's really up to the organization to split things out how they want to. Just below that, you see organizational capacity, the capability maturity framework for AV or CV is available to organizations if that's helpful. The operational environment, operations, and then across the middle though, I draw your attention to the policy, both state and national, because the legislative and statute barriers are really inextricable to other areas of readiness that you're looking at. You can have a perfect infrastructure, but if you have a law prohibiting a level 4 vehicle, then you have a problem in terms of getting to those benefits of automation that we're after ultimately. And then innovation, testing, consumer acceptance. Again, the importance of thinking about the community environment for these, and the acceptance and the willingness and where you're at in terms of that readiness. And then the collaboration, certainly with other states, but if you're a local agency working with your state DOT or your legislature, your other professional organizations are out there doing a lot of different things. So keep an eye out for that. There's, again, no shortage of resources or places to get engaged. So hopefully this was all helpful to you. It feels like I was covering a lot and not getting too deep into anything, but if you want to hear anything more about any of this, my contact info is shown on the bottom. If you're in a public agency, this is good food for thought as you're thinking about readiness. Another recommendation that we're making to every agency is make sure that you've got a point of contact, point of accountability, responsibility for your automation or your CAV program, whatever you're calling it. Ideally, you'll have an interagency working group or maybe within a DOT working group that is grappling with these. And I know among the 5 states within the Heartland that varies. Some are well organized for it, and others are getting there. And then if you're a consultant and you've listened to this and you're advising your clients on this, it's great stuff to be aware of. Definitely go and look up some of those other models that I mentioned, or if you're not finding something, just let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Even if you're disagreeing with something, I'd like to hear from you. So please connect, and thanks again for having me on your webinar, and have a good day. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, that was a lot of information, but a lot of good information. So appreciate that. Good summary of everything. And I'm sure many people will reach out to discuss even further. So next, we have another interesting presentation, this one from ITS Heartland's Iowa State Director, Austin Yates. If you watched last week's webinar, you met Austin when he presented the Iowa State update. Austin is a TSMO engineer for District 4 of Iowa DOT. Austin graduated from UNO, the University of Nebraska at Omaha, with a bachelor's in civil engineering, and has experience on the private and public side of over the last 13 years, of which I've actually known him for most of those 13 years. Austin will be speaking on the TSMO response to the floods last year in Southwest Iowa. Even though these floods seem to be happening more regularly, it is still surreal to drive through there once it has subsided slightly and see the water basically up to the shoulders on both sides of I-29. I thought I was way after the floods last year when I drove through, but the water was still very high, and it's crazy just driving through there. So Austin, please take it away. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Austin Yates at Iowa DOT, and I'm here to talk to you about TSMO during the 2019 floods in Southwest Iowa. So first off, our whole stance on this was we know that every day counts. If we consider a typical commute in Southwest Iowa and Southeast Nebraska, if Shenandoah, Iowa to Nebraska City, Nebraska, for example, this is a typical commute. It normally takes 40 minutes. When Missouri River's flooding and all these river crossings are underwater, that commute becomes an hour and 40 minutes. And this has such a negative effect on people getting to and from jobs, daycare, healthcare, as well as keeping interstate traffic on interstates. Just a quick summary on Iowa DOT, our organization, we're broken out into 6 districts. Des Moines, state capital, central headquarters in Ames, and I'm out of the District 4 Engineering Operations Office in Council Bluffs. So what I'm going to go over is a real brief history of the river, how we got to this point of the 2019 floods, what happened in the 2019 floods, our response, as well as our resiliency measures. So starting off with the river, I have a set of photos here. The one on the left is a braided stream. That's actually a photo of the Platte River, but that's what the Missouri River used to look like. You know, went from bluff to bluff, bunch of sandbars. And in 1912, the Corps of Engineers, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, started channelizing the Missouri River for barge traffic. In 1912, they went from St. Louis to Kansas City. Then in 1927, they started from Kansas City up to Sioux City to maintain a channel 200 feet wide and 12 feet deep. So you can see these wing dikes through the years trapping sediment and shrinking the width of the river and making it deeper. So here's a map of the Missouri River watershed. The Flood Control Act of 1944 was called the Pick-Sloan Flood Control Act, signed by President FDR. It combined the Army Corps of Engineers plan under General Lewis Pick with the Bureau of Reclamation's plan under Glenn Sloan. That was part of the Department of the Interior. So 2 competing bureaucracies managing the river together. So it's kind of a recipe for disaster at the start. Part of that Pick-Sloan plan created these 6 main stem dams and reservoirs. And we know in Omaha, Council Bluffs, and anybody in the area, there's a lot of hate about Gavin's Point Dam. Why don't they let more water out or keep more water back? You know, that's the lowest dam on the system. But if we look at the upper Missouri, that's a portion of the watershed that flows into the dam and reservoir system. Compared to the upper Missouri watershed and all the reservoirs, Gavin's Point Dam has about 4% of the total capacity of that. So by analogy, you imagine that whole kind of green shaded area that holds the water of a 5-gallon bucket. About 4% capacity is a 2/3 cup measuring cup. So you can see if you're dumping a 5-gallon bucket into a 2/3 measuring cup, that's not going to work unless you do it very, very slowly. So our last big flood was 2011. And after that, this is a aerial photo of Highway 2 down near Nebraska City. You can see that the Corps of Engineers rebuilt the levee system and tied into the bridge earthwork. We learned in 2019 that making that connection created a pinch point, and that was one of the top 5 pinch points in the river flow where the water backs up due to flow restriction. So that's kind of what happened on the river and what happened in 2019, where the flood started. Sioux Falls, South Dakota, these 2 graphs, the red on the top is temperature and the blue on the bottom is snow cover. So we had over a 10-day period going from below 0 with a foot of snow to being in the mid-40s and no snow, it all melted. Similar tune in Omaha. On March 8th, 2019, we were right around freezing with a little less than a foot of snow on the ground, and 5 days later we were in the 60s and all that snow had melted and we got rain on top of that. So as this bomb cyclone system moved through, melted all of this snow cover, ground was still frozen, so all of that water, pretty much 100% of it was runoff. There was very little capturing of that runoff. One of our lifelines for information during the floods was the stream gauges. So here's a visual of the Omaha gauge with the flood stages, just for comparison. And November 7th was the first day that the Omaha gauge got below flood stage. And we saw 3 of the top 6 crest height was in 2019. Similar down in Nebraska City, it was December 10th was the first day that stream gauge went below flood stage. And we actually had the highest crest height ever recorded in Nebraska City was in March 2019. So that created a lot of problems. We had massive stretches of the interstate system underwater. So how did we respond? Well, number one, we got organized. We broke all of our roads into segments and started getting all of our partners together, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, all the affected counties, all the cities in those counties, our federal partners, National Weather Service, Federal Highway, Federal Emergency Management Agency, and a bunch of contractors and consultants willing to help. Railroads were initially kind of competing and kind of doing whatever they wanted, but we got them to the table, and our media partners were paramount in getting all the word out to everybody affected. So we started cataloging our damage and figuring out what repairs needed to happen. Stood up a website that, we made this really public with links on 511, that kind of stuff. So tracking each of these segments by their status, road closed, water still on the roadway, and how we're progressing with our damage assessment, debris removal, repairs, and opening to traffic. So we have a great camera system, fiber optic connectivity, underground power, overhead power, whatever you got, but none of that's going to last for being underwater 30 days. So we lost our eyes basically as the flood water stuck around. So what we did was got camera trailers out there. These are really cost effective. They're less than $3,000 a one-time charge and about $30 a day to be out there. They're solar powered, so we don't have to worry about power lines. They're mobile, they're on wheels. We can move them around as flood waters come in, go down, and cell data modem connection enables us to keep an eye on what's going on all the time we can. They have, low light TV mode, so even when the sun's down and there's no overhead lighting, you can still see. So this is a picture of.
So this package arrived today, and it contains a game, one that I think basically no one has ever played. But before we try it out, I need to tell you the weird tale that's behind it.
Sounds like we had some technical difficulties. I'm assuming Slade is on it. So let's give it a handful of seconds here. I remember when I-29 was closed for a minute there. It was actually pretty impressive how quick they got it open after the flood subsided. Doing the repairs to the shoulders and safely doing improvements. Slade, what are we looking at?
Red circles out there. And all the rest of them that you see on this slide are camera trailers, plus two more that we had north of the Council Bluffs area. So these were great. We got great pictures off of these to show people, whether or not you believe us that this barricade that says road closed, that the road is actually closed. Here's an image. You can see how deep this water is on this semi that chose to drive around barricades. And we were able to do all kinds of outreach, whether it was on, social media and 511. And we relied heavily on our partnership with Waze through this. Most people know what Waze is by now, but if you don't, it's a navigation app at its core. It's owned by Google, but they don't have a lot to do with Google. But we have automatic two-way hands-off data sharing with Waze. If somebody puts something in Waze, it gets authenticated, goes on to 511. If we put something on 511, it goes straight to Waze and pops up. So how this comes into play, this is kind of Omaha, Council Bluffs metro area, and I'm going to highlight our interstate system in Council Bluffs. Pretty much I-29 going north out of Council Bluffs. We have I-80 take this diagonal route, and then it heads straight east to head over to Des Moines. We have 680 connecting I-29 to North Omaha. Then we also have 680, which is now since been renamed, and I'll talk about that in depth in a little bit. We also have 680 connecting I-29 to I-80. So this is, this spot between, kind of the Honey Creek area, that's our low spot on I-29, and that's what closed many times during the different rounds of the flood. So we have a really good global detour staying on interstate. It's not that much out of your way to take the I-80 diagonal and backtrack. If you're going north, for example, you go east on 80 and then west on 680, 880 to get back to I-29. That's our official detour, but we know you have to read signs to see the detours. So this is the route that's going to show up. You take I-29 up to 680, up to the closed spot, and then kind of take a couple county roads to get around it, which is fine if you're in a car generally. So what happens is, if you get up, this is right near the I-29, I-880 system interchange near Loveland. It's going to send you on DeSoto Avenue, which is great, like I said, if you're in a car, but right here, there's a low crossing. This is our Loveland mouse hole. 1 lane wide, 11 feet tall, fine in a car, anything bigger. Fortunately, there's good sight distance here, so we don't have a lot of people hitting this, except unprofessional drivers, meaning like U-Hauls or RVs are typically the ones we see here. Semi-trucks with professional drivers, they typically are looking far enough ahead that they're not seeing this. So if you happen to avoid hitting the mouse hole in a semi-truck, you see, so you don't turn down, you keep going up Les Hills Trail to Missouri Valley, where you're going to get on to I-29. This is where it's going to send you. But we have another low crossing, low tunnel here, and that's not so easy to see. So we had a ton of semi strikes on this. Sometimes we'd know they'd stick around, they'd get stuck. Sometimes they would be able to free themselves, and we just see, chunks of metal sitting on the ground, rolled up tin can of a semi roof laying on the road in the morning. So what we did on this is to further emphasize that this is not a way to go. We reached out to Waze, and they were able to put in basic kind of a fictitious closure. You can see all of this closed stuff here, was put in by our Waze folks, and that would get picked up by Google Maps and show closed and no longer route people through that way. But the bad part is Google Maps would be picking up on people driving through there, because it's not actually closed. The probe data would get picked up, and Google Maps would then show it as open, and Google would start routing you that way. So we got into a rhythm where Waze would pretty much have to refresh this closure about once a day, and that helped. Another thing we did in the spirit of TSMO is get word out otherwise. If you're not using Waze or Google Maps, most trucks are using something like Rand McNally, for example, and they didn't return any of our calls, even though we wanted to work with them and get trucks through here. We thought out of the box and went with this big, huge, interstate speed limit size. So this is, a large sign, kind of crafted it ourselves. It's not MUTCD compliant, but the risk of non-compliance was less than the risk of not having the sign out here. So large portion of truck drivers don't speak English as a first language. I'm not making any commentary on that. That's an objective fact. But regardless of what language you speak, you know what GPS means. So telling trucks to no longer follow their GPS really helped keep traffic off of that diversion route. So meanwhile, we're keeping people moving around the flooded area, and we have all kinds of repairs to do. And I'm not going to get into a huge level of detail on that. I know I'm doing a huge disservice to all the work that has been done by these men and women. I'm just going to show some pictures. A huge amount of debris that we had is on that kind of that right side is corn stover. It's everything left in a cornfield after harvest, and it all washed down. Most places it was about knee high. Some places it was shoulder high. Some places it was well over my head. I'm 6'1" for comparison. We had a huge culvert get washed out just from the amount of flood water, and those are normal sized human beings down there. You can see how huge this culvert was. So this was up north of Council Bluffs on I-29. Down south on Highway 2, this is a really important regional connection from basically trucks will get off of I-80 in Lincoln and take Highway 2 over to I-29 if you're going to Kansas City, for example. So this is a huge connection regionally for freight as well as for commuters. And after a month of being underwater, being closed, we had to do something. So we got this idea from the U.S. Forest Service to build a kind of a causeway using our concrete barrier. We call it TBR, temporary barrier rail, and put some rock in there, make it a drivable enough to convey traffic and get Highway 2 open. I jokingly called it a rock lobster once, and that name really stuck and has been perpetuated throughout history to this point. So here's kind of a schematic I drew after the fact. You know, we were just flying by the seat of our pants making this thing, but after we got it built, this is what it ended up being. So our TBR is 32 inches tall. So we have about a foot deep of large rock, about 3-inch rock that's drainable to convey water through it. Then we put some fabric on top of that, and the fabric keeps the smaller drivable road rock from infiltrating the larger rock. So a foot of large rock, and then another foot of just normal road rock on top of that, and then about an 8-inch head space from the top of the gravel to the top of the TBR, which enables us to put, you know, channelizers and reflectors and stuff on that. It's kind of problematic in places where we have super elevation, where one side is a lot higher than the other. But we were able to, our contractor was able to get this out and get it working. I have a time lapse of the whole construction of this. I'm just kind of mouse through this. You don't need to watch the whole thing, but placing the TBR on the upstream side and then the downstream side, kind of working their way out. And then they get the rock, start getting the rock placed, you know, so there's flowing water through this, and it's raining. It was raining periodically throughout the construction of this. And, you know, they get the fabric rolled out and get the road rock on top of that. So the westbound lanes were higher normally, and the eastbound lanes had some trouble. So the westbound lanes are on the left and the eastbound lanes are on the right. So the eastbound lanes were still really spongy and not really able to convey traffic, let alone semi trucks. But so we went ahead and we opened the westbound lanes with pilot car operation, basically, because it was that important to get this traffic restored. So westbound lanes open with pilot car, and that's what the finished product looks like. This is heading west. You're looking into Nebraska here. So after a month of sitting underwater, got it open on May 10th with a pilot car. You can see huge queues, but you know, waiting for 40 minutes here is still faster than driving around. We didn't have any. Our maximum wait time was we just kind of spot checked, and it seemed to be about half an hour was the longest people would wait. So we had that open for 5 days under the pilot car situation, and then we were able to open the eastbound lanes after that, about 5 days after that. But then what happened was another round of floods. So the road closed again on May 25th, and that was underwater for about another month. Got it open again on June 21st. Pavement was total loss this time, so we weren't really able to go with that rock lobster solution again, but we got it back open on August 1st. So what we saw was 4 rounds of flood: March, May, September, and October. So here's a total hydrograph from, you know, basically March to the end of November, and you can see these well-defined peaks. So in our March event, we came out of that swinging. You know, a lot of people were around in the 2011 flood. We can keep people moving, we can fix the roads, get this stuff back open. When the June event happened, we were just kicking ourselves, like, man, this has happened again, but we'll roll with the punches. We'll keep people moving. When the September and October floods came, we were just like, you know, how long is this going to last? Are we going to be having November and December floods? Are we already talking about 2020 floods, basically? So that gets us into our resiliency. So a lot of our resiliency is traditional concrete, steel, and asphalt. Some of our resiliency is TSMO, and I'll touch on that. So just north of the Council Bluffs area, we added about 2.5 feet of asphalt. That's a low area, normally not even during flood events. So that's right by our Council Bluffs north side garage. You can see the salt dome kind of right underneath that, looking west text. So north of Omaha, this is I-680, which was completely demolished in 2011. And we were able to do some cool solutions on this. So this was closed for 38 days total throughout the flooding of the 3 different floods. This didn't close in the October flood. But we put out this product called Fleximat. It's usually used for coastal armoring situations. So it's just a net with these concrete blocks on them, kind of impregnated on the net. And this takes the beating from the floodwaters instead of the shoulder, and so we won't see any of this erosion or anything. So we didn't get this all the way rolled out before the June flood hit, and you get a good before and after. So you can see where the Fleximat was. We have this real well-defined edge on the downstream edge of the pavement, and where the Fleximat was not is the real raggedy. You can see the erosion happening. So we know this stuff works, and we've used this in a lot of places, not just 680. So I-29 near Honey Creek, this was our most plagued with closures. This was closed for 100 days total throughout the 4 flood events. Our old overtop was at 29.4 feet and 680 overtop at 31 feet. So we have this area, this period of time where 680 is open and 29 is not, and that's where we got the most erroneous traffic going up Old Lincoln Highway and Les Hills Trail. So what we did is we raised up the northbound lanes by about 1.5 feet. So now 29 and 680 will close at the same time, and they'll be able to reopen at the same time. We did just the northbound lanes from a traffic perspective. This is traffic volume is low enough that we can accommodate traffic in a head-to-head configuration with both one lane of both directions just on northbound lanes only. So where the TSMO aspect of resiliency comes in is our tale of 2 680s. We have 680 starts in, kind of central western Omaha, goes up and around, intersects I-29. It's a concurrent section between the two, from Crescent up to Loveland, and then 680 again from 29 over to I-80. So lots of confusion, lots of delay as a result of the confusion. This overhead DMS, this is not a real message. I photoshopped this. The left pane did say I-29 north closed, but this was a true message. 680 west closed, use 80 east to 680 west. That's technically true, and it makes no sense. So we said, what does it take to renumber an interstate? You may or may not know that there is a system of numbering with the 3-digit routes. So an even number, first digit of a 3-digit is a loop. It will reconnect you to the interstate. And an odd number of that first digit is a spur. It just dumps you off the interstate, like I-180 in Lincoln, going from I-80, dumping off into downtown Lincoln. So we knew that's where we were proposing 880 because we have 280. We already have 280 in the Quad Cities, 480 in Omaha Council Bluffs, and 680 in Omaha Council Bluffs. So we went with 880. It could have been 429, 229, 429, 629, 829, but we went with 880 because it lends itself to some low-cost improvements, just with a few cases of white spray paint. So we learned that there's a U.S. Route Numbering Committee, part of AASHTO, and our Strategic Performance Division out of our central headquarters spearheaded this effort. We got it to AASHTO's attention the day before the submittals were due to the Route Numbering Committee. It usually takes around a month to prepare, but we got a 4-day extension, and our strategic performance staff got all of this paperwork filled out, and we got it approved on October 5th. And got the signs out there, got media blast out there, got this renumbered. So now it's easier to communicate what's open, what's closed, and what detour route to take. There's no more 2 680s. And then down on Highway 2, just to wrap up, you can see that horseshoe shape of the levee that we talked about earlier. So we're building a new set of bridges. We're calling them the overflow bridges, but they're new bridges on Highway 2 just immediately east of the river bridge. So we can get rid of that horseshoe shape, allow more floodwaters through there, and as well as keep Highway 2 higher. Just grade raise, nothing's flood proof. We're just limiting how long it's going to be, how long it'll be closed and how quickly we can reopen. So here's just some more pictures of these overflow bridges. They're both open, and and conveying traffic right now. And then last thing we're doing is we're going to do some more grade raises on Highway 2 east of the overflow bridges. And then in the area of the I-29 interchange, we are installing a new dike around this area to protect the interchange, as well as all these businesses and stuff there. So that'll be about $11.5 million total. And the dike, now we're learning about creating a levee district and making all that kind of stuff. So DOT is participating in the dike option, but we are not leading that. We're just another stakeholder. So I talked about, brief history of the Missouri River, what happened in the 2019 floods, our TSMO-oriented response, and our TSMO resiliency. And I'm going to close out with this list of everybody that helped out, and hopefully we don't have to do this again. But, all in all, I'd rather have another flood than a pandemic, because it's much easier to be out and around people and getting stuff figured out instead of being distanced and masked and everything you have to do to be safe. So hopefully everybody, you stay safe, you stay sane, and maybe see you in person at the next ITS Heartland. So thank you.
Thanks, Austin. That was a fantastic presentation. I kind of wish your real 880 signs were actually just painted like you had in your graphic. That would make me laugh every time I drove through there. So also, I appreciate your Dumb and Dumber gifts. The sad part about being virtual in this pandemic is that we can't enjoy the audience's laughter at your jokes. So I laughed, just so you know that. But another thing I noticed was your coordination with Waze and Google. That's a neat sub-story to this large presentation. I definitely use Google at all times, and I'm sure most people do. And sometimes it does take you down smaller streets through neighborhoods or odd back roads, which aren't always the route the jurisdiction doesn't want you to take. So that coordination aspect was definitely interesting. So thanks again, Austin. Our next presentation is a vendor showcase from HAAS Alert and their safety cloud. This is an interesting service they're providing for emergency vehicles. So Corey will present this.
Hi, my name's Corey, CEO and co-founder at HAAS Alert. HAAS Alert was started when I was nearly struck and killed personally by an ambulance here in the city of Chicago. And we started to look at how we could get emergency vehicles to communicate to connected vehicles and navigation apps to notify drivers when emergency vehicles were about to go through an intersection or were working on scene. Shortly thereafter, we started to get calls from DOTs, utility, towing, construction, even waste and sanitation, snowplows, all wanting to do the same thing. Rather than rely on lights and sirens, they wanted a way to be able to digitally alert drivers in the roadway. The way our service works is we have an aftermarket device that attaches in about 20 minutes, and as soon as the amber light or the emergency light or the snowplow activates, our service begins to broadcast, letting drivers know that those fleet vehicles are active in the road. Now, we do have a hardware-less option as well. If you already have a telematics or AVL solution such as Geotab, Cradlepoint, Verizon Connect, WebFleet, and others to be announced, you can easily activate HAAS Alert without adding additional hardware to the fleet. Now, what comes along with our service is also a situational awareness dashboard. What this does is it allows you to see where your active working vehicles are, and as well as be able to use that information to activate other local fleets that you may work with on one seamless dashboard to be able to view all the fleet assets in one screen. So this means on our fleets that are using the entire turnpike, they could actually add the different jurisdictions that they pass through for state police or EMS or local cities so that they can all coordinate where their vehicles are. Additionally, we have a product called Fleet Fusion, which allows you to take that information and instead of only viewing it in our dashboard, you can send it to emergency management centers, traffic incident management centers, even ArcGIS layers, and it really is flexible. Even we have some cities that are using it for Smart City to send to variable message boards. So it puts you in control and have the power to be able to use that information for other services that you know best. Now, different types of fleets that we serve besides police, fire, and EMS, KC Scout, PA Turnpike, we're piloting with North Dakota DOT, we're working with state patrols across the US, we're in the Maine Turnpike, Ohio Turnpike, and the list goes on. We're in over 135 different fleets across the nation and even starting to roll out globally in different fleet types. HAAS Alert also comes standard by manufacturers of fleet vehicles, so be sure to ask your fleet manufacturer if HAAS Alert comes standard. Looking forward to hearing more about your use case and how HAAS Alert can be helpful to provide additional safety for your fleet and those that are working to provide and maintain our transportation network. Thank you so much, and looking forward to chatting.
Thanks, Corey and John. Very neat and helpful product. Last but not least, I guess our last presentation is our Nebraska State update from Matt Baker. He is ITS Heartland's Nebraska State Director and was our treasurer last year. Matt is Nebraska Department of Transportation's TSMO engineer. I know we all love our state updates, and one thing I think is interesting about our ITS Heartland region is how it encompasses the most rural of all rural, such as in western Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska, as well as urban ITS installations such as in Omaha, Kansas City, Des Moines, etc. And I know the ITS implementations in Nebraska always, his updates always encompass one side or the other, or both, or everything. So Matt, I'm excited about your update.
Good morning. This is the fall 2020 Nebraska DOT update. I was having a conversation with a coworker earlier this year talking about our annual personal goal performance measures, and we always talk about how are we going to quantify our success each year. And he had revealed that he never liked it when I talked like an engineer and wanting to quantify success. And I said that, well, that was fair enough. You're in customer service, and we ought to think about it a different way, but we still need to figure out and define what success is. And we both thought about it for a while and decided that the best way to look at it would be success would be us getting into a proactive versus reactive state. If we can think about some things before they happen. In his case, if we could come up with an asset management replacement program that might lower some of those reactive customer service calls, that would be certainly a good definition of success. So with that, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about are in a proactive state, which we have now wanted to define as successful. The first one is the TSMO strategic plan. We've gotten started here in the last month or so working with the consultant to kind of go through a discovery process so the consultant is a little bit more familiar with where we currently are. We kind of agree that NDOT has a respectable TSMO culture already established, but we recognize there's a lot of things that we could continue to improve on. And some of the next steps that we're getting into is our stakeholder engagement. And I think a lot of things will be revealed. Sometimes we get blinders on and we don't quite see it from the other viewpoints. So we're looking forward to that. Another proactive thing is we're looking to upgrade our 511 website. Like a lot of states around us, we're going to, this winter, run the new site in parallel, keeping the old site up to make sure that we maintain service. A couple of the nice features that are going to come with this that we're really excited about are automated Twitter feeds, improved segment control for reporting. We're also going to have radar overlayment and even weather warning polygons displayed on the website, along with bringing back our messages that we post on the DMS boards will be available on the website as well. Looking back slightly, one of the things that we've worked on a lot this year after 2019 flooding was kind of some after action methods to help us be proactive about forecasting flooding and other events in the future. One of the byproducts of that is something we're fairly proud of, is a flood forecast matrix. We took many different variables, including what is the forecasted rain event that's coming in, what kind of rain has already happened. You know, is the ground saturated? Is the ground frozen? What kind of snowpack do we already have? And what are some of our vulnerable locations around the area that we think is going to hit hardest? And we're kind of intend on plugging in some of those data points into this matrix and kind of give a flooding threat level for any given area. And that'll help us kind of get some traffic control set up, get some information out to the traveling public, really be proactive about our response to something as best we can. This was certainly something that we came away from 2019 wanting to try to achieve, you know, hoping that the nature of something historic is just that, it won't happen again, but we can certainly improve through a matrix like this. So we're looking forward to that and hoping we don't have to use it too much. Another area that we're continuing to improve our metrics on is our maintenance decision support system. We thought this year we would put an extra focus on measuring our preparation for winter ops. This is a snapshot of our dashboard that captures some of the basic elements of just showing that our winter ops fleet is ready or not ready to respond. It kind of breaks it down by individual components. Some of these you don't necessarily have ready until is closer to time for winter ops, but it gives us a good idea of where we need to work on something and where we are sitting great at, and kind of shows a district by district breakdown. And this dashboard can be broken down by yards and even individual trucks if you drill down. So it's become a very useful tool for everyone around the department. Our hope is that increasing our focus on preparation will then lead us to good metrics during our response. And the idea is to measure our actual reaction to the recommendations that the system gives us, and in hopes that we create some efficiencies both in our resources and our funding. Along those lines, something that I talked about last year was setting up a on-call conference hotline between Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, and Kansas, and that any of the member states could set up a conference call to kind of stand up the 4 states TMCs for an upcoming incoming winter event or other weather event. The next phase of that is we've started talking with the old I-80 corridor coalition, and Nevada has been awarded an NCOM grant that Nebraska is going to take a part in. They're hoping to recreate the success that Nevada and Utah have had along the I-15 corridor, where they have assembled the data feeds from the individual state 511 websites along with other resources, and created a single website that allows regional freight companies and others to take advantage of something that's agnostic to state borders. So we hope to recreate that product along the I-80 corridor as well. Our ITS deployment initiative this year is our variable speed sign in the western half of the state. This is the last component of our ongoing connected interchange long-term initiative. After after this, we will continue to work on improving our communications to these interchanges and seeing what comes next. But we're excited to extend the variable speed arrays and having some continually improved corridor management along with Wyoming and allowing the traveling public to have a longer corridor of connectivity and good information. And the last success story that I wanted to talk about today was our statewide TIM incident management groups. We have doubled the number of groups across the state. The West Central, Southeast, and Omaha area groups already existed, and this year we've added a Panhandle, a Tri-City, and an East Central group. The success of those first three groups really catapulted these three additional groups and given us coverage along the entire length of I-80 in Nebraska. All of these groups have already met once and had small group meetings as well, along with their initial self-assessment, so they have a good idea of where they stand up front and what does success look like and what they should strive for going forward over the next couple of years. So I guess in conclusion, everything that we're working on is trying to continually improve and make us proactive instead of reactive. That is all that I had to share today. Hope you enjoy the rest of the conferences.
All right, thanks, Matt. Nebraska is always a leader of the TIM training, so glad to see you guys are continuing that success. If you ever see a national map of percentage of people being trained in traffic incident management, Nebraska is always number one by usually a far margin. So it's good to see that. Today, I'm going to hand it over to your current ITS Heartland president, Slade Engstrom, and he's going to present the 2020 Best of ITS Awards and take you home. So Slade, whenever you're ready. And Slade, if you're talking, you are muted.
I was talking. I'm sorry, I'm taking a second here to switch this over. We try to give out this award every year. Not always do we do it every year, but in this case, there were two really good submittals that we wanted to recognize, especially during the pandemic, and still try to kind of get these going. So I'll dig right into it and go straight into it. One is a service and the other is a plan. So the first is the MoDOT KDOT real-time digital warning system. And the awards committee really felt that this is a great award to give out because it is a cheap, easy to implement tool that protects both the drivers of the emergency vehicles and other motorists. And essentially how it works is when an emergency vehicle operator turn on their flashing lights, a warning message is sent for a third-party in-dash system and phone apps to pick it up. So primarily using Waze, the message is transmitted out, but as more vehicles with connected capabilities start coming online, the product will increase. And so every time anybody turns on their lights with 48 vehicles in the metro regions of both St. Louis and Kansas City, they will be transmitting out the Waze, basically the Waze warning as well. The people who submitted the project, if you would like more information on it, Randy Johnson and Michael Flory with KC Scout and Jamie Rana with Gateway Guide. So again, thanks to everybody for submitting, and it's a great project, and I'll give myself, or I'll be the only applause, but I'm sure many at home are doing the same as well. So great job again. The second is a project award for the KDOT statewide CAV plan. And the things that kind of made this CAV plan unique was the vision and framework that they went through to get to it. They also used not just their DOT as the author of the plan, but they also incorporated a number of other state agencies, such as the Department of Agriculture, Insurance Commission, and the plan actually reflects blueprints within each agency as to how to bring them along. So it was very encompassing, as well as it they reached out to other stakeholder groups, such as Fort Riley, Garmin, Ford, AAA, and a number of other people that within the state that have basically interests in the plan as well. So those were the big pieces that the awards committee felt like it was kind of unique, but it did a really encompassing job on what they put together. And with that, again, thanks to KDOT for the statewide CAV plan for submitting it. If you want more information, Chuck Miller with HNTB and Mike Floberg with the Kansas Department of Transportation will be some further contacts on that. So again, thank you. Great job on that project. And we are now at an end to our second webinar. Please keep tuning in. We're trying to do these every week to kind of get some of these presentations out, like Kurt said last time. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors for these, to be able to provide these for free to you all, and kind of at least get a little bit of being able to kind of talk with you all. And last but not least, again, we've said it last time, the date change has happened. We are moving to a fall meeting next year as well to try and get the best chance of that in-person meeting to happen. So again, mark your calendars if you haven't already, November 8th through 10th. And with that, I will stop talking and you all can go about your fine days again, and I will talk to you again next week. Thank you again for joining, and again, look forward to talking to you next week.